The opinions expressed in this program are not those of CISA 7 or Time Warner Cable.
What's your tomorrow?
First is our open forum. This is the time for members of the community to speak before the board on any issue that they would like. I have no forms filled out, but if there's anyone who would like to speak before the board, you can indicate that now. Otherwise, we will move on to our agenda. All 7 board members are here, and we're also joined at the table by Dr. Michelle Langenfeld, our superintendent. We have 2 Intercity Student Council members, Priyanka Navani, who's the president of Intercity Student Council from Preble, and Mitch McMahon, who is a student at Southwest. And Mitch, you're welcome to participate at any point. Then we are also joined by members of our superintendent's cabinet. First, we'll move to our teaching and learning work session, and that will be facilitated by Katie Maloney.
Thank you, Brenda. Our first item on the agenda is the Fulbright Teacher Exchange Program. And Paula will facilitate that.
Good evening.
This was one postponed from last month because a better offer was received.
And wasn't pictured.
No, sadly. But a good time was had.
Okay, good.
All right.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to introduce Mireya Peak and our Fulbright Teacher Exchange teacher from Mexico City. We were honored this year to have one of our own teachers at Eisenhower Elementary, Sean Fields, one of our bilingual first grade teachers, get accepted to a Fulbright Teacher Exchange in Mexico City for the year, and his exchange partner has been Mireya. Also on my right is Crystal Trejo, first grade bilingual teacher at Eisenhower, and she's been serving as Mireya's mentor throughout the year, so we really appreciate everything that Crystal has done. I have to just say a couple words about Mireya. She came into the school year expecting to be team teaching with another teacher in 3rd grade, due to some staffing and student adjustments that needed to be made. A couple days before school, she found out not only would she not be team teaching in 3rd grade, but she would be teaching on her own 4th grade. And I just have to give her so much credit. She has been a trooper throughout the entire process. She's incredibly hardworking. Anything that we've done, we've asked of her. She's just participated fully, and I think she's been an outstanding addition to Eisenhower this year, and what she's been able to bring to not only our staff but our students. So at this time, I'll turn it over to her.
Okay, thank you. Well, I've been here for 2 months, and everything is new for me. Many things. There are some difference between Green Bay and Mexico City teaching, and there are 2 different kinds of schools in Mexico: private schools and public schools. Public schools have just started to give English to the elementary school. They didn't have it. We have been teaching English there for 3 years only now, so they are just like going through it. They are working basically in competencies. We only teach 3 hours a week. Maybe there can be 1 hour sessions or 1.5 hour sessions in a week for each group. So it's very little for them to start, but it's starting. And we are just going through it. In private schools where I have been teaching 17 years, maybe 17 years, those are completely different, because we have half time of the school is in Spanish and half time of the school is in English. And then where I used to teach was a reading program, based in a reading program, but we have also vocabulary to learn every week, 20 words every week. And we read also a book with all the kids, like every week also. And we have grammar points, and we have some stuff to go through the program. We have a book with the book has 30 stories along the year. I'm going to be reading because I'm going to forget something. We have also CD with all the readings. Sometimes we use it, not always. It depending on how we are working with the kids. We have also a spelling bee contest with the students, and they love it. They like it very much. And then they can have also a picture dictionary. Here, what I have is a little bit different from all these things that I have been teaching there. And here I have to work 8 hours per day with many things to learn, like CHAMPS or SARA, mathematics, language workshop, reading workshop, writing workshop, bilingual strategies to teach while teaching all subjects. Science in Mexico is taught by another teacher. We don't teach science, not in the private schools. I have to get used to many acronyms just in Green Bay, because many times you were talking about many acronyms, and they say, what is that? And I have to write it down. Yes. I have had challenges and also opportunities as well. Every day I think I'm feeling more confident in doing the way I'm teaching the students and the way I am assessing students. So that's all I have to say. Maybe in 10 minutes talk about a lot of experience over there, but if you have some questions, maybe I can answer some, I don't know.
I feel your pain about the acronyms. I understand.
Yeah, it was hard, and sometimes, what is this? And then I have to write it down, but well, getting used to it.
Chris.
First of all, thank you for coming and leaving your home and being willing to share your expertise with us here in Green Bay. I am curious as to how our parents are treating you, or how they have treated you.
Well, here in Green Bay, I have had a nice time everywhere. First thing that I have to go to restaurants to eat, and everybody treat me very well. And in school, I have had a nice time all the time. We have been working very hard. We didn't have time even to look at each other very much in the day, but I have had very good experiences. And everybody's just like trying to help me and trying to help with something in school. So my experience is a very nice one.
Other comments or questions? I have to echo Corey's appreciation of the fact that you came here with the idea you were going to be team teaching with someone, which I think would be, a great experience, and then to step in and take on a classroom yourself. That's
it was a challenge, but I said I can. Okay, I can. So go on. Also, I'm trying to do it the best I can. So, well, there are many things to talk about, but maybe on time we will maybe go into it.
Another comment, if I may. May I ask, will you have the opportunity to go home for Christmas, or will you be up here?
No, I'm going to stay here. I think it's better to stay, because if you go home, like you break what you have been having here. I think you have to stay here. Okay. I had a chance to be last weekend with a friend in Minneapolis that is a friend of myself I went with her for when I was 18 years old. So, and we continue being in touch by mails and by letters, and she invited me, and I had a very nice Thanksgiving Day because I wanted to experience that. I want to take my kids down to in Mexico, experiences like that, so they know how are they really, because we know all like stories. There are stories that are not really real, so I want to take that home with real pictures of real students being with me now this year.
You're going to go back with the rest of the story.
Yes, I think.
I invited Crystal because I thought she might be able to offer kind of a teacher perspective of working with Midrea, but also Crystal's been at Eisenhower for 11 years. So she has been a part of the wonderful culture there in the community, and I thought she might be able to offer a perspective of what she's seen as the impact of being a part of the Fulbright exchange program.
Well, I mean, it's very nice to have, with such a high Spanish-speaking population, to have someone who's actually from where a lot of these parents come from, So they have that same sort of mindset, and Mireya has done a really good job at being able to be that connection with parents that some of us may not be able to make, even though we're able to speak Spanish. It's more of that culture that she brings into it. And Mireya is, I don't even know like how to explain. She has tackled any sort of anything put in front of her without even blinking twice. She has the stamina of always just, okay, what's next? What's next? Okay, I'll cross this off of my list. Just that go get them and don't ever stop is amazing. And the fact that we don't have a lot of overlap between, you know, when lunches are before school, after school, with all sorts of different things that both of us have to go to. When we find those 5 minutes, okay, what is one thing we can tackle right now? And it's just taking it piece by piece instead of looking at this huge, big puzzle and trying to figure out where to go.
Follow-up question. Speaking about parents and good relationships with parents, how do we improve that? Are we learning some things now that you're visiting and teaching in our schools? Are we learning some things that will improve what we do and what we're currently doing, current practices, to bring parents more readily into the system and having them feel like they're part of Eisenhower or all of our schools? Are you talking about that? And you can't let her go till we get that answer. So. But how we could improve that, or you spoke to that just briefly?
I mean, like Mireya and I meet at lunchtime for, you know, the 10 minutes that we have of overlap. But I mean, we do kind of talk about things that are the same, things are different, and every time like she says something, whether it's meant to like help me, I've always tried to like, okay, notch that one back there. I need to make sure that I word it in a certain way.
But I think as a district, one of our opportunities really is to make sure that all families feel welcome and part of their children's education. And I think sometimes that's a little more challenging when people are joining us from other experiences and cultures, and we want to make sure they feel welcome and comfortable in our schools. And this is a great way to do it, but are you going to stay? Probably not for years.
No,
yeah.
I think it's similar, like, you know, Crystal said, having someone who is directly from Mexico City. Some of the kids maybe that are born here, they don't really know about where their own parents grew up. So there's that connection, and like Crystal said, we can't always make that connection, even though we have bilingual speakers. I know she's worked with all 4th grade classrooms, and she's provided some learning opportunities for all 4th grade students to not only learn about a little bit more about her, but about Mexico City and some of their traditions and their customs. And we worked it in with some of, you know, something very basic with the Gary Howard Equity work. I know when I sat in the gym and she was leading the learning about sharing where people are born, and the kids really started very, you know, they were quiet for a while, but as soon as people started sharing where their parents were born and teachers started sharing where their parents or grandparents were born, it just opened the, you know, it seemed like the kids were so amazed at all the different locations that they weren't all born in Green Bay. So something even that simple that we sometimes take for granted, I think has been able to take it up to that next notch. And we're still hoping, you know, there's a lot of the year ahead of us. And right now it's been about survival in many ways. But like Crystal said, she has never complained once. I mean, she's really a model for when things seem to be getting overwhelming. Like you're getting overwhelmed, just stop, take a step back, and, you know, tomorrow is another day, and not allowing herself to get overwhelmed, because it would be really easy to do. There's a lot of demands in our building, and it would be very easy to take that path, and she's chosen instead to stay on that path of optimism.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much for sharing your experience.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this experience. Good night.
Sorry.
Next on our agenda is the School for Academically Gifted Learners Grade Additions. Paula's coming back.
Tammy's going to join us. So we've been before you 3 times to talk about our programming for the academically gifted. One was to start the school within a school at Langlade. One was to start the school within a school at Lombardi. One was to present a transition plan for you as we transitioned, hopefully, to a new building. So we wanted to make sure that we kind of really knew what it was that we were planning to do and hoping for your approval at the new standalone building at 139 South Monroe Avenue. And that is that we would like to have a building that is K through 8. So if you look through the report that we sent you, we shared some information on why and what the research shows and why we think that's important. But I think ultimately we believe that K through 8 offers an opportunity for us to best serve the students. We really don't grade them in the school for the academically gifted schools within a school. So they work at their age-appropriate level. So if we have a student that is in first grade level and they're in kindergarten, we'll be able to serve that student. If we have a student who's in 5th grade, we can serve, and they're at the 8th grade level, we would be able to serve that student as well. We also have the option for the students to go still to the middle school at Lombardi. We are looking at maybe tweaking that a little bit and trying to figure out what this would mean. And they also have an avenue to go into their home school, their attendance area school. So there's really 3 pathways for our students if we can have this building be a K-8. Anything you want to add, Tammy?
I think you touched on it. My biggest thing is after experiencing both programs this year, that was very informative and eye-opening for me. And definitely it became apparent that there are needs that some students have as gifted and talented students that are difficult to meet in a larger setting, where a smaller K-8 setting would be more appropriate for their social, emotional, and academic needs.
So our governance request to you would be that you approve the building as being a K-8 building. And then if you've got any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Andrew.
Just in brief, and I'm sure there's more work to be done on it, could you give just a general outline of what electives and areas outside of the Big Four academics would look like at a small K-8 like this?
What we provide, we would still cover the same Common Core standards that are covered in any of our other middle schools, but we do it a little bit differently. With cross-curricular design, we would want to continue that all the way through 8th grade, covering the curriculum that needs to be covered, but doing it a little bit more creative and connecting things for the GT students. We find that gifted students really learn best when they see the whole and break it down to the parts. So it would be look a little differently than what we would offer at a Lombardi, but at the same time, we'd be addressing the Common Core standards that need to be. As far as
just talking about specials.
They'd still have the music that way.
Music, physical education.
But we're not going to have the same facilities as Lombardi would to pull off some of the electives that they have.
Right.
So we continue with our
almost all the electives. So I'm kind of wondering what the alternative. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just wondering where things are as far as an alternative plan. Are you going to do FACE there, or? Because that tends to be, that's rather equipment intensive, or are you going to not do it and cover concepts a different way? I mean, that's just an example, because 6th graders still rotate through FACE for part of the year. Yes.
They didn't when we had the 6th graders last year at the SWIAS program at Langlade. We covered that same curriculum, but in a little bit different fashion.
We have to cover the health and the physical education pieces that are required. And then we can incorporate some of the other content areas into the coursework interdisciplinary that they're doing. But we're looking at continuing with physical education, art, music, and providing those opportunities. It just may not be as structured as it is at a middle school where every other day you're in art, music, and it rotates. So that's one of the pieces that we're still continuing to look at, and we have to look at from a staffing perspective as well as we roll out.
Would you anticipate students going out for certain things if they are a gifted student, both academically and talented as well? I mean, you probably have both.
Yep. And that's some of the work that we're doing with the Transportation Task Force is, could we have our students go over to Aldo for some things? We start to look at the fine arts, for example. We should be identifying students for more than just being academically gifted as part of GP. So it might require that we have their core classes in the morning and then they bus over to maybe Washington or Aldo in the afternoon. So I think each student's different and each one will have their individual learning plan that we'll have to accommodate.
Barry?
I just wanted, because your school is largely ungraded, you don't have to reach a certain threshold with enrollment to offer 7th and 8th grade. It would just be there for if you had 1 or 2 children at that level, or explain that a little bit more to me.
She's talking about moving on to the next grade. So if you're a 6th grader, to move on to 7th grade, you have to meet, or to go into 9th grade.
No, go ahead and start trying to get out.
Do you have students wanting to get into the school now who would be in 8th grade in the fall?
I don't have anybody who's expressed interest in that way at this point.
Offering 8th grade.
Correct, because we have some.
Just in case?
Correct. We have some students right now that are in a current 6th or 7th grade that may have a better environment or a more conducive environment to their learning if they were to come over to the school within a school than to remain at the middle school where they currently attend.
And you don't have to have a minimum number of students to offer 8th grade.
Correct.
Right, because of the way we do our academic structuring. Right now, for example, I have 1 student doing 8th grade math.
Okay.
Correct.
And I have 7 students doing 7th grade math.
You have to have a certain number to offer a class, but that's not the case at your school.
So you're not talking about being promoted to the next grade. You're talking about, will we offer 8th grade if we have 1 student who needs it? Yes.
So the teacher is doing like a one-room schoolhouse.
They teach multiple levels.
And most elementary school teachers are certified either
through 8th grade
or 1 through 8.
Correct.
And we've posted all of our positions that way.
That have a limited window, but you would be posted accordingly so that we would have the certified staff. Mike?
Tammy, would you talk a little bit about the special skills that you're looking for in your staff, that you look for in your current staff at Langley, and then what you're looking for as we expand staff at the new school?
Well, first of all, you look for somebody who has a heart for gifted children. You really have to enjoy working with children who are going to challenge you each and every day. You can never stay ahead of them. They're always one step ahead of you. So that's the first thing we look for. The other thing is we look for students who are teachers who are team players, who are willing to work together, because this school cannot function if everybody's off doing their own thing. We have to work together. We share students all day long. So we look for somebody who's willing to work together. We also look for people who have a desire to think outside the box, so to speak, and be willing to do things differently, to differentiate, to be comfortable teaching math at this level, language arts at this level, content at this level, and be flexible. That's huge. And it can change, in a month. The group of students you have can fluctuate and change. So you have to be real comfortable with change.
Okay.
So those are some of the key qualities. And of course we want somebody who's academically a with it person as well, because they have to love learning as much as those students are going to love learning on a daily basis.
Do you see any, and maybe this is directed at Kim, do you see any additional need for some specific professional development for that staff?
Yep, and we have that in the budget. Each proposal that we've brought forward, we've known that professional learning is significant. And there's certain conferences that the staff can attend. But Tammy's done a really nice job of laying out a professional learning plan for the staff, both during the time that they have available in the district, and then also making sure that we're attending a conference if necessary. So absolutely.
Dr. Richard Cash wrote a book on differentiating instruction for high-achieving learners, and he was actually at a conference, and we met him last year, and he was so excited. He's from the Minnesota area, and he agreed to be a mentor for us. So he emails and answers questions for us, and we've been using his book in all of our curriculum unit developments because it really focuses on the depth of learning and the essential questions, and even within that top group of kids there's still differentiating that has to take place. So it's been exciting to use his work as we move forward.
The other piece, Mike, that I think, to go back to your previous question that we didn't mention is we really need staff that are aware of the child's social development and their emotional well-being. That's one of the things we're learning, I think, particularly at the middle school, is it's one thing to have the content and to be able to stay a step ahead academically, but you also have to have the understanding of where the kids are at emotionally and socially as a gifted child. And that's really important, and that doesn't always come through in a typical job description, so that's something that we really do look for as well. Or that we're providing the professional learning to make sure that they understand that developmental piece. So.
Thank you.
Chris.
About three things or so, or more.
Chris, three, and then other people.
With all due respect, your description of your teacher, other than saying liking, gifted, and talented, sounds like any teacher we should be having in our district and fostering. In terms of the social well-being, I mean, really triggered something in my mind. There are kids that are gifted and talented who put so much pressure on themselves, and if they don't, their parents or peers do. And I think statistically you'll find a high percentage of GT kids committing suicide. So you don't have to provide a response right now, but I do hope we build in the program something to deal with that aspect of it. And to me, that's extremely important for their well-being and not go over it blithely. The other thing, I just want to be clear that not all gifted and talented kids will be going to this school or forced to go to this school, and they will still be served in other schools within our district. So, and what I'm saying is correct, right? Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, I feel this gives one more choice for parents.
That's two. Is there a third thing?
No, there's a third one. There was a comment and two questions.
Okay.
I'll come back, though.
They'll be back.
If I can read my notes here.
Yeah.
I see here that it says, the older the child, the harder it will be to make the transition. So being that there are no grades given, how will a person's progress be measured? Because if they are two different levels of education and two different methods, how do we know that they would be successful in that setting?
When we mean there are no grades, we mean we don't call them first grade, second grade, third grade. We do give academic grades, but we don't. I thought of that too when Kim said that. I'm like, we do grade them. We do grade them.
Yes.
I had to think about
You
that
asked the
myself.
question,
Yes.
she was thinking.
Yeah, we do grade them. We have high standards for academic achievement. We just don't refer to them as first. And it's actually kind of cute. A little story from a couple weeks ago. We were talking about basketball teams and that we would be able to have fourth and fifth grade because we don't have enough fifth graders to have a team. And one of the kids is sitting in the class and he raised his hand and he goes, "Am I in fourth grade?" I'm like, but they're so used that we don't refer to anybody by grades. They don't even think about it that way anymore, which is exactly what we wanted. So it's working.
Brenda.
And I assume too that the Lombardi program will continue, and you will continue, and you've mentioned a couple of things that you're looking to change and tweak and things like that. But so there are some of your students that are doing well in the middle school setting, and you see that as being something that will be an ongoing program, even though you're now offering 7th and 8th back at the school for the school.
I think it's a very different student that needs that smaller environment from the one. Most of them would love to just get to the middle school. They know there's more opportunities there, a lot of co-curricular, extracurricular things they can get involved in. But there are some that there's such an asynchronous development for them that even though academically they're way up here, socially, emotionally, they're just not ready for that at that point. And our goal would be to make sure that they're ready and raring and set for high school.
I think our key piece as we look at Lombardi, and we've had a lot of discussion, is you know, is there a way to duplicate what we're trying to do at Lombardi at all of our middle schools with the current staff that we have, just deploying them differently, our SRTs, sorry. So I think that's part of the thing that we really have to dig in and look at, and as we look at our program evaluation, you know, having that at Lombardi was great. We've learned a lot, but is there a way to duplicate that so that these kids can really just feed right into their attendance area in middle school, and maybe it's just not at Lombardi? And to go back to the piece around professional learning, what we've also learned is it isn't just the professional learning that we need to do with the staff that are teaching in the school within the school, but how are we professionally learning all of the staff? So that they understand that the expectations of a student in the school within a school may look a little differently than it does for your typical middle school student. So how are we helping all of the staff understand that, not just the small group that's in that classroom or the one teacher? And that's what we're kind of starting to look at from a middle school perspective.
When we think about, and Dr. Wagner's comment triggered this, having done some research on gifted and talented as we were moving forward, we know that 1 in 4 of gifted and talented students who sit in a regular classroom, particularly those in poverty, have the greatest likelihood of dropping out of school. How are we identifying students to make sure that students aren't falling through the cracks because they don't have someone advocating for how bright they are?
I would love to have a universal screener given to all kindergarten students. And that's what they do in St. Paul, Minnesota. They use the Niglari. And when we were at the recent conference, that was my main goal, was to go to every session I could on identification. And that's what we found. A lot of school districts are doing that, using a universal screener for all students when they enter school, so that we don't rely on the parents advocating or the teacher catching, but we're providing that opportunity to all students who need it. They can choose to take part of it and not, but it's been offered.
What does that involve?
There's a cost to give the test, and then it would be logistically figuring out how to give the test to all of the students. But the one thing about it that I think is exciting is that you can give a test that show what students know, and that's their achievement. What have they already been taught? But if you give an ability test, you're looking at what's their ability to learn. And there's a big difference. That isn't then based on culture, or in fact, the Niglari doesn't even have any reading or writing or math in it. It's all pictures and shapes and all I'm thinking up here. They're tough.
What kind of money are we talking about?
I just ordered tests to do our first round of testing, and you can get 10 tests for about $59.
So multiply that out by all of our kindergarten.
3,000.
Plus the time.
Plus the time.
Right, so
Instead of
$6 a test.
It doesn't. You can actually give it whole group. With kindergartners, I think giving it like the day they walk in the door would be a little overwhelming, especially if you're doing it whole group. So you'd want to look at how that's best so that students can demonstrate their ability in the best way. But it's 30 minutes, very easy to administer. You can hand score them and save money that way. But a lot of the bigger districts look at that as a way to make sure you're not opening yourself up to not identifying students of color and students of poverty.
And do the test results have merit other than identifying? I mean, you can use it in the regular class.
Well, I think if you looked at it and you said, we have a student who, let's say on the STAR, is achieving here, but their ability score says they should be achieving way up here, then that's a different challenge than if both scores are lower, of how you would attack that challenge, in my mind.
I'd like to know more.
So I think to answer your question, we do rely on the staff and the principals. We rely on, obviously, looking for means of transportation for those families. And then making sure, I think this would be a way, if we brought in a universal screener, we would feel much more confident that we're reaching out across the board and not just relying on those other pieces. So now we really count on our buildings to let us know, and then finding ways to get them there if the transportation's not there, and those pieces. But, and multiple data points.
I think the opportunity is to understand what the gifted child looks like, and the gifted child looks like other things. Sometimes they're the child who is the most disruptive, they're the child who's never in their seat, there's a child who always is busy, argumentative. I mean, there's a lot of things that people see in gifted children that they make assumptions about, and it's not who that child is. So,
And that goes back a little bit to that professional learning for all of our staff that we talk about. So
I want to make sure we capture children and don't drop out. So.
Well, we currently had Marshall work with us quite a bit from an equity perspective, and plan to bring Jennifer in to our conversations as well. So we're making sure we've got that district equity lens as well. But that is a challenge, and we are trying to figure out the ways to tackle that.
Andrew?
Is there going to be a world language component school-wide?
We have Spanish right now, would continue that.
Any other questions or comments? Now, this is listed as a discussion item, but you have a governance request.
Yeah, we move it on to the next meeting.
Okay, so we will take action on this one, just so people are aware that discussion item, the previous discussion item, there's no action. But this one will, because everything's listed as discussion now with our new format.
Just a point of clarification, are you talking about the K through 8 component right off the bat when you open the school?
Correct.
Okay.
In fall 2014.
I think our understanding is usually everything at this meeting is discussion, and when it moves forward for that one vote, it becomes action.
Right, and it's, when there's a governance request, then it's an action item. If there isn't a governance request, you know, are taking action. All right, there you go. Figured that one out. All right.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you.
Go back 5
Anything else?
steps.
Okay, Bailey Manufacturing Curriculum and Resources. So, Brady's joining us, Mike Rich. I'm gonna let Mike kick us off. All right.
Hi guys, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm with Sarah Bram, our Career and Technical Education Curriculum Coordinator, and she's here, and I'm here to answer questions as well about the curriculum aspect of the Baylink Manufacturing program that was approved previously.
All right, so on page 2 of our board report, you will see, I guess I like visuals a little bit better, but we offer fabrication and restoration as a course, a year-long course, both at Preble and at West currently. And the proposal is to change that course, take out a little bit of the restoration piece, so like the auto collision piece, and pull out only the metals pieces and teach that within the Baylink manufacturing course, or called Metals at West High School, and then also to add 2 transcribed credit courses, Machine Shop 1 and Welding, Cutting, Visual. So right now that would be the curriculum that students would take. For next year, Metals will not be a requirement because students would not be able to take that course as a 9th through 12th grader, but in following years, in the fall of 2015, that will be a prerequisite to getting into the courses, into Machine Shop 1 and Welding, Cutting, Visual as the Baylink Manufacturing. Any questions?
Questions or comments? Brenda?
So there will be students who have not had fabrication and restoration who will enter Machine Shop 1 next year.
Correct.
And then after that, the metals course will be required.
Correct.
So
And
the
with
teachers will just have to make adjustments knowing that they won't have the background and experience that they will the following year.
Correct. And one, we don't know what jobs we will have yet as part of Baylink Manufacturing, so we're not sure where the learning curve will be. So next year will really be a year for us to gauge what kinds of jobs we will bring in. 2 is we will work with counselors. Andy Belangi, the teacher, will work with counselors to identify students that have taken welding courses, either as a semester or as a year-long course, to make sure that their knowledge base is there. This metals course really would be building upon that welding. It would be providing a gap between taking welding, then you would take metals, then you would take machine shop. So we may have a little bit of a gap, but that's why the students will have a 3-hour block in the afternoon, so that one, we can give credit where credit is due to the 2 transcribed credit courses with NWTC, but also to fill in any of those gaps competency-wise for students that may have not been able to take that metals course. They are going to recommend, they being counselors, are going to recommend that students take Metals 1 concurrently if they have room in their schedule, but that's a lot of hours out of the day. So if there's any way that they could even stay after school to work with Mr. Belangi or any of the other teachers within West High School to pick up on those competencies, we're definitely going to be flexible that first year.
And we had to do something similar with the Habitat for Humanity and the NeighborWorks piece too, because some of those students that didn't have the construction courses to get in, we had to spend a couple weeks at the beginning of the year making sure we were bringing them up to speed, and actually quite a few of them before we were able to let them go out on the job site.
Mike?
What efforts are we making to accommodate students from our other high schools that may be interested in this program?
When we met with all of the counselors for the course book, this is being promoted at all the high schools. Specifically Preble, I'm going to be honest, because they have more of the Metals program already up and running, so they have a lot of students that are taking welding and the fabrication restoration courses already. Students at Southwest are definitely going to be promoted to be able to come over to Baylink Manufacturing, but they have a lot of offerings at Southwest as well, so depending on what pathway that the students want to go into, it really depends on where they would be interested in traveling. And East High School students, right now we don't have any metals courses at all at East High School. It's primarily vehicle service and then your engineering courses and woods courses, so they are definitely going to be promoting those students that are interested in any metals courses to be coming over to West and being a part of Baylink Manufacturing and taking these courses at West High School. And we're hoping that through the Transportation Task Force that there will be, I'm just going to keep throwing that term out there, that there will be opportunities for our students to travel if they don't have the means to within their family.
Now, as I recall, aren't these courses like later in the day, so it'd be easier?
Their 6th, 7th, and 8th hour is what we're thinking for a block in the afternoon.
Okay.
And what we've learned, the same as with the construction courses, is we really need to rely on the teacher and the school counselors to knock on the door of the kids and to promote that and to give us those names. Because just putting it in the course description book is not, doesn't do it. So when we met with the counselors, we told them we really need your help. We rely on you to get us the kids that are a good fit.
And I've had a lot of questions already from counselors clarifying things or kind of throwing ideas out about, okay, I have this student that wants to do this and maybe we could work their schedule that way. So they're talking about it. And if I'm hearing questions already now and it's only December 2nd, I'm excited because I think it'll be a really great opportunity for our students.
Has the Transportation Task Force met? Once.
Okay. We got it all figured out.
Because that is critical. I mean, these great programs, but we need to make them accessible. Chris.
After Celestine.
Oh, why, thank you.
Celestine.
Just so happens there was an article in the New York Times yesterday where factory apprenticeship is latest model from Germany, and it's about a company in South Carolina, and the president of the company basically said that he didn't have the workers he needed, so he did what he would do back home in Germany, and I'll just read it. He set out to train them himself, working with 5 local high schools and a career center in Aiken County, South Carolina, and a curriculum nearly identical to one of the company's headquarters in Friedrichshafen, Tognum, which is the name of the company, now has 9 juniors and seniors enrolled in its apprenticeship program. So it just so happens there was an article in the New York Times yesterday, which I read cover to cover, about what we're doing right up here. They should have come here.
They should have.
This article.
They should have. Yes.
Yes, now you met.
If indeed,
Thank you for sharing that, Celestine.
if indeed you read the New York Times thoroughly, then you don't do much on Sunday besides
That's
read.
exactly
do you?
right. So don't call me on
It's a whole different orientation because in Germany they feel they have responsibility to youth to train them. In this country, they tend to be back on the public schools. It seems like too many employers, most employers don't feel they have an obligation here. You're supposed to train them for us when they get here. And it's been very hard to break that. I have a series of questions, and we had a short week, so I didn't have a chance to give you a heads up. So if you can't answer them now, that's fine, maybe next week. But it sort of ties in what we're talking about, selling kids on these programs and the curriculum and whatnot. Do you know right now how many overloads we have in the tech ed area?
Mr. Smith, do you?
I can get it for you.
Okay, that's a concern because in that area there are a lot of doubletons and singletons. So when you have teachers having 3, 4, 5 preps, that's not healthy. Plus, I know we have some with overloads. And my question comes back, quite frankly, I was at Preble High School visiting the welding teacher there, and I asked a series of questions, as I do with most teachers when I visit different places. Do you know how many openings in the state there are for tech ed teachers? And along with that, do you know how many are being graduated from Stout? And then my next question is, what are we doing about it? Are we going after folks? And if we're not, we're going to lose. We're in trouble. That's very much of a concern of mine. I do remember when I was back there at a time there was always a shortage in that tech ed area. I tend to think of special education having its problems that way, but tech ed to a large degree is even worse. And we've got to go after those people big time. From what I understand, there are several more openings than there are teachers. Okay, in the past we used to be lucky to work and court people that were graduating at the semester. I don't know whether that's being done. If not, we need to do it. You did talk about welding, and I'd like you to go back and check, because if I heard it right, we only have 4 welding stations at Preble that are operational right now, and we should have 12. And if indeed that's true, and that's not being addressed, and I see the second floor here being remodeled, I've got a problem with that, because we need to take care of our kids in that particular area.
I went over there last year to Preble. We actually are working on all of
well, that was last year. We're already towards the end of the first semester this year. So, we've got to maybe move a little bit faster than that. And again, you don't have to respond. I want you to think about it and have maybe a thought-out answer later on. It shouldn't be sitting there like that all this time. And we're saying this program's so great to get our kids in there when we don't even have enough equipment for them. That's a problem.
And we went over last year, actually, probably outside of even my realm of responsibilities, did a complete audit of what they have at Preble, what they don't have at Preble, what they need at Preble, and laid out a plan of how to get all of that done and up and running. And I believe Mark and Mike have been working on that with the kids building some of the equipment and getting all of those welding stations.
Well, thank you, but the teacher told me he offered to do that, and he was then told no. So I mean, right hand has to know what the left hand's doing with this. We need to work with our tech ed area. That's a wonderful area for students to learn and grow and have future careers.
And that's who I worked with, was Jeremy. Okay. He laid everything out for us, and I think Mark's got it. So, yeah.
Well, again, I really appreciate if you take a look at that. I just, I don't understand how this is over a year now that we have all these stations that are needed that still aren't there. That's beyond me.
Celestine.
I think Chris brings up a good point about capacity, the capacity of the staff, the existing staff, but also recruiting new staff members. And 100 years ago, not really, 7 years ago, I went with Bob Schmidt for a recruiting trip to, basically we were at Vanderbilt. And what we have to offer here in Green Bay Public Schools is what a lot of other school districts don't offer around the country. Granted, I know that teachers don't move hundreds of miles usually to get a teaching job, but at the same time, I think it's a nice recruiting tool for us that we have this program for tech ed teachers who may be looking for positions. That's an interesting point. I mean, it's capacity is always on the back end. Yes, it's a great program, but how we're continuing to recruit, and I think that's attractive for us.
I think what you need to know as far as recruiting for tech ed positions is not only will it require recruiting, it will require finances. Because when I attend a recent meeting at OSSAW, and there's other administrators in the room, it's really becoming who will pay them the most.
Yes.
And that was the conversation, and they're all facing the same challenge that we are with not being able to get tech ed teachers, and they're recruiting them aggressively. They get a commitment, but then they leave and go to the other district that's then offered them more. And that happened to us last year.
Okay.
And we even moved up a timing a staffing timeline to try to get someone who was doing their student teaching here, and we still lost out because there was more financial backing in a different district. So I think, just so you know, that as a board, as we look at those pieces from a staffing perspective, we also have to know that there's a financial
Competition.
piece to that and competition to that.
And I mean, I have to say, to be serious but a little cheeky at the same time, it was very hard to compete with the school districts that had Teach at the Beach. They literally had a big sign that said Teach at the Beach. And by the way, we'll give you so much money for a down payment on a house. And we'll give you a signing bonus. And so, that was a very interesting little shark-infested environment to be in. And I just had to say, well, we still have good health benefits, and we still have recess and art and music in our district, although it's cold. So, but no, I appreciate what you're saying. It's something for us to think about, I think.
And we have heard from other school districts that are doing job shops similar to what we are going to be starting at West, that they actually are pulling people from industry back into education. So whether it's by utilizing them in a different way within the classroom that are working towards their education, their teaching license.
So for 1 or 2 periods a day.
Right. We were recently at Algoma High School, and that's how they were using, within their machine shop, in their CNC mills, they had a programmer that was his job, and they utilized him similar to like a paraprofessional within the classroom while he was working on his licensure. So there are other options to pull people from industry to come back, because I think, just like a month ago that we saw when we had Mark Kaiser here, he was saying that the industry is now noticing how much they need to give back and invest back into education, because if they don't, they're not going to have the skilled workforce. Just like that article said from the New York Times, they're not going to have the skilled workforce staying here in Green Bay. They're going to be going elsewhere because they can make more, or be in a warmer climate, or be teaching at the beach. I don't know, maybe you can weld at the beach.
If I may comment, Ms. Paula, you implied that the board has to be aware of financial implications, that we may have to go above what we normally do. I believe that's already been broached by Mrs. Marsh and the board in terms of hiring administration, so I don't think that's going to be a particular problem.
Any other questions or comments?
Oh, I have one. Sorry.
That's okay. No, this is fine.
Good thing you
That's why
haven't
I asked the
smacked me yet,
question.
yes.
Go ahead.
The one question I had just was about the, oh heck, now I closed it. It said that, so for the machine shop one, it said it'll be faster. So if you, Kristen, can you scroll down a little bit? So it said right there. So it said shop safety. So you do shop safety in machine shop one, but not in the other ones? And maybe that's just a minor stupid point, but it just struck me.
This is, we take that specific listing from NWTC's course book. So that's how they have their courses set up. So we have to meet their bottom of the line competencies within our curriculum. We can go above and beyond, and in which way we teach those competencies is our own art and craft to education and to teaching, but this is specifically what they have. So they do cover a unit, because you're within machine shop, you're utilizing different machining tools. So I think it's just revisiting, how when you're working on a machine, you stand within the red lines, and only one person can work there unless the teacher's with you, and there are specific rules versus, welding or metals, may have a different setup on how they work through their competencies.
And I guess the reason why I bring that up is because I'm glad you said it was NWTC, because I thought, why is it there weren't? Because these are
those are
16-year-olds as opposed to 20-year-olds. And I think that developmental difference may warrant more. But, if it's, the teachers will understand that this is what they'll do perhaps in every course, reiterating what shop safety is.
Within tech ed or any CT area, the first week is almost always, even family and consumer science, within tech ed, they're always talking about the safety within whatever realm of lessons or units they are teaching at that time. So they're always talking about that.
I think when my kids were taking FACE at Washington, my son had to buy a pair of goggles to make an orange Julius with a blender. So.
You never know what can happen with those blenders, right?
Sixth graders,
I can attest to that.
Yes,
Yes. As we're talking about this and something in the conversation triggered, there was an ongoing, prior to Baylink Manufacturing even having a name, if I recall, all the high school technology people came to the table. Am I right? Did I sit in those meetings where we had representation from all the 4 high schools at the table, talking about manufacturing and talking about this as something that we would consider? I got the impression every high school was all in on this idea moving forward. Am I wrong on that?
That's correct. We've asked all of their views and perspectives. Sarah and Lori hold a CTE meeting once a month where it's been conversation. We brought several of them with us to Aleva Strum and have had conversations. I think Preble was present. I know Preble was present. And then from that conversation of if we can't do manufacturing in all of our high schools,
Where would we go?
what can we do where? That's what led the conversation about, can Preble continue to be the comprehensive high school that offers some of these pieces? And what equipment don't they have that they need, which led to the audit last year that we're actually moving on. So that, they were part of that conversation, yes. Yep.
I was just trying to recall. Thank you.
And I think I even went over after, Lori Peacock and I went over again to do an actual visit of the site and then talked about how they could tie into some of the Baylink piece. Correct.
Just wanted to make sure.
Just as a matter of reference, I have some updated information. Do you want me to provide it as a board update for everyone, or meet with Dr. Wagner? How would you prefer to have that?
I prefer the board to know everything.
Board update.
It's not a
Yeah, I would like
Yeah,
to
I didn't mean to imply just you, but how you wanted it reported out.
Right.
Yeah, I think we're looking at the overload information and then the status of the
Building
upgrade,
labs and
which
booths
really
and-
falls under
Yep.
Mark. Yep.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? Nope. Hearing none, we'll move that forward.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, exciting program.
And the last discussion item, federal regulation requirement of board approval for Head Start self-assessment.
Terry, I'll let you lead off.
Dan and Sally and Mary have been working hard looking at the federal regulations for the Head Start program, and as part of our annual granting process, we typically bring the information that you have before you with the application in March that Sally prepares. But Sally uncovered some new federal regulation information, and I'll let her share that information with you and request.
You can refer to page 3 that lists the Head Start regulation under management systems and procedures. We've been conducting a self-assessment of our Head Start program for many, many, many years, and the results of that self-assessment, which includes a summary of our strengths and areas to strengthen, as well as our improvement plan, have always been shared with Head Start supervision as well as school board liaison. But we noticed when Mary and I, and we meet monthly, we're going through the monitoring protocol that the government puts out every year for Head Start programs, we noticed that the self-assessment is now, they've regulated that it needs to be approved by board. And with this being a on-site year, we thought it would probably be a really good idea. I know it's kind of after the fact, and we'll be starting our self-assessment now coming in January 2014 of this school year. We thought it'd be a really good idea to just get it in the minutes and have it approved. So it is the 2013 self-assessment. It does go to the federal government with the grant application every year, April 1st. But wanted to share and certainly answer any questions that you might have. I know it's quite a lengthy document. We gather our staff and we gather community representatives and district partners such as special education staff, and our policy council, our parents, we also include, we break it into 5 teams, and then we do a training about self-assessment, and then we send the teams out into our organization to assess all areas of our program. So it's like we're doing our own review yearly. And we are regulated to do the review or the self-assessment process even on a federal review year. So because we're scheduled for a federal review this year doesn't mean we don't have to do our own self-assessment. So it's a really good process. It strengthens staff knowledge. We like to mix them up, so we don't always want classroom teachers and staff being in the early childhood development area. We like them to go into the health area or the to learn more about how we recruit and how we enroll Head Start children into the program and what the regulations are, or more about the program governance and the fiscal piece, which I usually manage, so generally staff don't know a lot about that area. So we like to mix them up. It's just a really good way of staff learning more about Head Start regulations because, you know, there are so many to learn and know.
So it's a useful process.
It's a very useful process. Good. It is. And we identify areas to strengthen, and then we put together an improvement plan. The improvement plan is in the packet here. We, with all of the action steps listed, we have either completed them by now or we are in process of completing them. So we meet monthly as managers and we review this improvement plan and we check off where we're at and where we need to go yet with the action steps.
Okay.
Mike.
Sally, what are you hearing from Washington on the future of Head Start funding and how that affects our enrollment?
Well, I heard probably what all of you did after the last government shutdown, that we could be looking at another in January. We were not in any jeopardy as far as our program here in Green Bay with the October shutdown because of our grant year cycle, which runs July 1st through June 30th. If it happens again in January, again, we will not be at risk. You know, your guess is as good as mine. I've heard nothing about another sequestration, but in my Head Start world, I haven't heard any bad news, but I haven't heard any good news. I think we all just
right.
Currently, we have over 70 children who qualify for Head Start but are not enrolled because of our cap.
Oh, that's correct. We actually have over 100 waitlist children.
That's
so we would love to, you know.
That's unacceptable.
Yes.
And we're talking about that very seriously. We'll have something to move forward.
Good. Those kids really need that.
It's not an option.
Start.
Chris.
Since you're sitting there, and again, I didn't ask you ahead of time, I'm curious how it's going from your perspective now being housed where several of the Head Start classes are as opposed to being housed in BCO. And again, you know, I provide an answer at another time if you prefer.
No, I'm prepared to answer that. It was an unexpected change, but it's proven to be a very positive one. We moved 11 of the 12 staff that were down in room 144 here out into Keller and the Head Start Learning Center. There are 3 at Keller, and that would mean 8 are at the Head Start Learning Center. 7 of those staff are home visitors. So they are now in school buildings, connecting with families, connecting with staff, connecting with the children. It's been very positive. At the Head Start Learning Center, and we're on first floor from where John Dewey is on third, right. We don't have daytime custodians, we don't have building paras, things like that. So the extra hands have been very helpful because we have over 200 children at that site. And they're 3 and 4 and they're very needy. So the extra hands have been fabulous. And as far as me being there, it's been very positive. It's very distracting, but it's a very good distraction because I'm always pulled in for custodial issues and busing issues. And well, just like any building principal would be, there's a lot of issues going on. But I love it. You know, it makes you sit back and realize all of the hard work behind the scenes that I've always done is, you know, you get to just live it day to day with the children. So it's been very positive. Excellent move. And I think whoever came up with that idea for doing it should have done it many years ago.
Oh, I did it. No.
Who else is going to let the minutes reflect?
Yeah. And we did
had worked well. You just wouldn't have said anything.
Yeah. We did leave one clerical here in central registration to assist with the registration process of the Head Start children.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll move that forward.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, our last readiness to schedule a board retreat.
Yeah. We're looking at scheduling a retreat sometime in January.
There's just been a number of questions, so.
So I think the 13th,
Yeah, there's no.
that
board.
Monday, I'll throw that date out first.
Well, we need to have a meeting that Monday anyway, a brief one, albeit brief.
That's right.
Yeah, so that would
You
be,
have a date on the.
ring a bell, so that would be good.
Works for me. We're
Yeah,
talking the
I can't
13th?
come on the 13th, but everyone else can. Don't let that stop up the works. Just go ahead and do it.
Does a different time help you or no?
No. 13th is up.
Because otherwise then we run into days other than Monday, which are out.
I mean, the 27th is open, is that too late?
Yeah,
I can never do the last one.
I
Okay.
can't do the last one. Can you do the 27th, Allison?
Yes, I could do the 27th.
You guys want to rock, paper, scissors?
No, I think you should do it. I think you should do it earlier rather than later.
Okay.
And I'll just get filled in later.
It would be helpful to do it early.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think
all right.
I can't make everything, so.
What time are we looking at? 5?
5?
5:30? Andrew, what about?
What time would
Yeah, I
we
mean, I have all Mondays reserved at 5:30.
start at
And
5:30?
I work till 5, so I couldn't get
Oh,
here.
okay.
So 5:30.
5:30?
Sounds good.
All right. And then we'll do the meeting first. And then-
Yep, very good.
Okay.
Are there any announcements? Formerly known as all matters.
Look at her, she's giving you the evil eye.
I know,
over there,
I
too.
called them announcements, but I just thought I'd clarify, and the people were wondering, announcements?
I was waiting to see if you were going somewhere else.
Take a short little breaky.
Hearing none, that concludes our portion. And so let's take a little break.
Little breaky.
All right.
Just a little one.
Right there. We don't have many things tonight, but first one will be talking about naming of a school for the academically gifted learners.
One more time, Taylor.
Alan, I didn't mean to jump over you, but I didn't have any discussion items on here. You didn't have any? Okay.
Oh, sugar.
In a nutshell, what we're asking is for an exception to the policy that currently exists on how to name a school. And Terry's group will be coming up next, and the policy includes needing to have a committee, and there's lots of steps. But it does not allow for the naming of a school after a significant donor, which we believe we have the potential with the School for the Academically Gifted to secure. So we would need to go outside of the policy that currently exists to allow the naming of a school, if applicable, in honor of a donor. And that's what the government's request is.
Well, I'm sorry.
So this is a question from Melissa. So the governance request says, allow an exception to the board policy naming facilities. So the planning committee for the site at 139 South Monroe can consider naming the building after a donor if applicable. So can consider and if applicable. Are those wide enough so that we can reject the naming of the school after a donor if, well,
Could the board, is your question, could the board reject the recommendation
Yes.
from? Yes, the board could reject the recommendation.
okay.
So still subject to board approval, even though
Right.
we're outside the policy.
And then Thank you. And then the other sort of part of that is, what if someone says, I will give you $600,000 if you name the building after me, but it's someone who is not acceptable?
I don't think the committee would come back to you with an unacceptable recommendation. I think we've been working on this, and Kim and I looked at some policies today that other districts have adopted, and in addition considered some federal IRS guidance on this as well.
Okay.
And we would, of course, vet any name we would come back to you with, and we would make sure that it is appropriate and acceptable. Am I speaking? No.
Okay.
I appreciate what you're saying in this last remark, but to Celestine's point, I think we want to be very careful. Both of you are not from this community. Those of us that have lived here a long time, I mean, there are some skeletons back there in certain situations that, you know, somebody may not be appropriate for various reasons. So I just want to emphasize, I think we have to be careful with that piece of it. Andrew?
I guess I just want to reiterate too, there might be someone who is a name that's acceptable to the committee that the board just isn't okay with, in a legitimate professional difference of opinion, and that's okay. That happens, and we might go another direction. It's interesting that 500,000 is exactly what I thought of when there was a proposal to name Red Smith the name a developer wanted, and they were going to offer, I believe, one plot of land and raffle it off, which there was philosophical opposition to the idea, but mine was just that it wasn't enough compensation. I think 500,000 to be named after a donor who is an acceptable person with compatible values to the district and the board is reasonable.
I think that's one of the things we've been struggling with, is there's not a piece of paper that tells us exactly what we should be asking for things. You know, we tried to actually base this off of, I think, the information that Dr. Wagner provided when they did the fundraiser at Preble. It was a well-done document that we were able to take back to the committee and say, you know, here's kind of the ballpark of seating for a stadium or an auditorium. Where do you think a building falls? And you also want to make sure that you don't have that so high that no one would consider donating either when you're looking to raise $1 million, which is what we're trying to do. So I think that's what Melissa and I have talked more about, is should we as a district be looking at some guidelines across the district, not just for this high school or this high school or this high school or this building or that building, but what do we as a district think are reasonable pieces that we could bring back at some point, but we don't have that right now. So that's what we're trying to operate under.
Yeah, I think we need to include the implications of any other public money we might have access to, or whether there are any restrictions if something is named with private money. I think we need to look at implications if we name a school for someone and then that someone does something that is not conducive to having our school named after them. What's our recourse?
And as we explore this, there are a number of districts outside of the state of Wisconsin who have done this, and there are model contracts out there. We would not only have a policy and have protocol in place, but we would absolutely enter into a contract with the individual should we give that person naming rights to the school, and we would set out procedures for how a name would no longer be associated with that school. And work through those issues.
The contract,
Absolutely.
the person and their heirs.
Correct, absolutely. Would bind their assigns and their heirs as we move forward.
And I think we have to make it clear to potential donors that this is subject to board approval, and that I think we should also ask them, let's say somebody wants to donate $500,000, but the board isn't interested in naming the school after him or her or whatever, would they still donate the money even though we won't name the school after them? I think we should explore that as well.
In my mind, 500,000 doesn't sound like a lot to have an entire school named after you, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think we looked at, we did a stadium for, I think it was 350. So you take a stadium the size of Preble Stadium and you look at the size of the building, that it's a different size building than a Preble High School. It's a smaller building. But I think you could argue a lot of different directions, and I think we just looked at what seemed reasonable compared to what we've asked for other pieces. We're trying to go through some of the same pieces now when you're looking at buying turf or raising money to put turf on football fields. What gives you a naming right of an end zone? What gives you the naming right of? And it sounds ludicrous, but it's what's happening, and we have very little guideline right now that we're trying to operate.
That's the current reality.
Yes.
But this is the first time we're considering naming an entire school.
And we can certainly, we're open to suggestions if you want it to be higher. That was just what we've been trying to.
And I called someone and they said, it's 50%, usually about half of whatever you're trying to raise is typically what gives you naming rights. But now I'm just having a blank.
I think it was Dave Pamper.
Yes.
Oh, that's what I talked to. Yeah.
And this is maybe a question for Alan, but when I look, you've itemized exactly what this donor would pay for. Are those items that are included in the original estimate of what it would cost to renovate the property?
These are items.
This donation would not offset the cost of renovation. These are above and beyond the cost of the renovation.
Correct. These would be above what we would do basic in a building.
Because I would like to see a donor have an impact financially on the renovation cost of the building. Because that's what we had talked about originally when we talked about what that price tag was for the number of students.
What we did was talk to Mike Stengel about what if there was none of this up on the board, what would the district be doing in that building? So what we're asking for the $1 million is above and beyond the basics, replacing the windows. We worked on some innovative furniture conversations. So the things that are listed up there wouldn't be typically what we would do in a building in the district.
I'm kind of with Mary on this one. I think if you want to, if you're going to name a portion of the school where something extra is being done, I think that has a little different feel to it. Where if you're naming a building, it seems to make more sense that you would have some involvement in the overall construction of the school. But I think I would probably be okay if that could be. I would think that could be accomplished in a ledger book too. I would probably be okay if it was done by a designation of funds. I mean, those are things we should be doing anyways, I think so. But I think there's a valid point in at least some of the money. If you only do extras and the money is not instrumental in the school actually opening, it has a little different feel.
Yeah, I think the discussion that Tammy, probably more than even I am, so correct me if I'm wrong, that we're running into is the donors are wanting to know specifically what they're donating to. They don't want to just donate to a general renovation. They want to know specifically what is the money going to. There's also, I think, some impression out there that these things were going to happen whether we raised the money or not. So why would we fundraise if that's going to happen? So what we're saying is these things aren't going to happen if we don't fundraise, because they're not typically what we would do in a building in our district. So that's what we're hearing from the donors. What are we donating to, and how are we how are we adding to what would normally be done that the district wouldn't foot the bill for already? That's what we're hearing.
If that's what they're asking for, then I guess I would.
Yeah. So that's just what we're hearing.
Ms. Jeffries?
Well, I think that's an interesting point. I remember there was a private school in Chicago on the South Side, Brother Rice, and they had a very swanky chemistry and physics lab, which the money was donated by alums, and the person who was responsible for most of it had his name put up on, like, right above as you walked into this very swanky physics chemistry lab. That makes some sense to me, especially since it just so happens that $500,000 for innovative technology is also what we're talking about today as a threshold for a naming rights donation. And so if you're giving $500,000 for innovative technology, that person could have his or her name above the lab. They could have a little logo on little laptops if that's part of it that the students get. That makes sense. And I have to say, too, perhaps it's not the issue of donating money for the overall building, but what about a foundation? Not foundation, that's the wrong word. Money in perpetuity. So an endowment, thank you. An endowment. So once again, sorry to allude to Chicago again, there's a gentleman who grew up on the south side of Chicago. His name is Gary Comer. He made a lot of money, came back to the south side of Chicago, and gave an endowment to start the Gary Comer Center, which is a youth center on one side, and then it's also a high school on the other side. Endowment money seems to me to be much more akin to naming.
Yeah,
Did you have that conversation?
I've also recently talked to someone who said that donors aren't as willing to donate to endowments as they are. Yeah, that was our fundraising conversation with
They want
Fine Arts.
specific things.
Yeah, so.
Okay.
But I get your point that if someone's giving $500,000 and it's going for the possibility of having innovative technology at the school, then the technology lab can be named after that person.
Maybe if I could.
I think it's a bricks and mortar thing if you get a school named after you. The school is there because of you, not the computer lab.
Well, in putting this together, that's really more of a summary of the costs. It's not like there's not going to be a computer lab because that's not the way the school would use technology. But instead, we're looking at a different way of having a library. So it's a thinking studio rather than a library, set up very similar to just sort of a Starbucks type atmosphere where people are able to plug in and learn. So there would be technology in that room that would be very different than what would be in a traditional library. That school is not also going to have all the books that a traditional library has, but these kids read like there's no tomorrow. They go to the library one day, read the book, and need a new one the next day. So we're looking at how do we use technology to satisfy that need for reading. So it's not like there's going to be a room where all this technology is. That technology will be throughout the building, used constantly everywhere, in the hallways, in the classrooms. It is the foundation of that building, in essence, not the brick and mortar, but the foundation of how we learn. And having worked with the families and the parents, we have met with the mayor, we've met with the Green Bay Community Foundation, we have met with Jim Rivet, we have met with Mr. Voss, who put together the Catherine Voss Center at St. Norbert College. So this group has really done their homework in gathering information about how to go about raising funds for this school. And the feedback we received is that you have to go to people with more than a list like this. You have to go with them and create a picture of what that school is going to be. So it's like, how can you create this thinking studio in this school? Or what will the commons become? So that it's a place where the community sees that they can have events as well as the school. So I think that's where the group is coming from. They have descriptions that go with all of these that show how it all comes together in the building, if that makes any more sense. But they've done a great deal of research.
How did the issue of naming?
Yeah. Pardon?
How did the issue of naming the school after a donor come up? Did that come from this group, or?
That's been out there a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, that was out there from prior to even moving forward.
I mean, here's
I don't dispute anything you said, but
Right.
it sort of is.
That's right.
Okay, I think that there was initial
That's right, because,
conversation.
I mean, I think a thinking studio, and I mean, unless it's a school with no walls, then there are in fact rooms. And, you know, perhaps there are corridors, and there are areas, and like I said, even down to, you know, something on the physical things that the children use, this young people use every day, that basically speaks to this person's donation of $500,000. I think, you know, the other thing too is I will always speak for myself, I am very hesitant to wade into these waters. So I approach this conversation with that sentiment that I'm reticent, and, you know, I'm trying to be very open about the concept of doing this, but I feel like I don't want to be honest with you. And I would be much more comfortable naming the, you know, like the technology cafe, sorry, that was what stuck in my head since you said Starbucks, you know, and the laptops, that feels more comfortable to me than the entire building. But that's just me.
Well, I picked that up actually from 3 of you right now, and I don't know where the other 3 are. I know where I am with it, but Mike, not to put you on the spot, any your thoughts on this?
Well, I think the point I made before is that let's say somebody gives $500,000 and the board figures that, well, thank you for the donation, we appreciate that, but we don't want to name the school after you. My question would be to that donor, will you still give us the $500,000, or are you only going to give us $500,000 if we name the school after you? I think I share Celestine's concerns. I know around the country, if 6 or 8 or 10 years ago you thought public schools were going to get into naming rights, you'd say you're crazy. But schools all around the country are doing that. And, you know, we're doing it with athletic fields and stadiums. It's a big leap for the school district to go from naming, you know, our high schools are geographic locations, our middle schools are famous people, our elementary schools have traditionally been famous local residents, most of them historical. So to veer away from that is a major step. And I guess I'm open to further discussion and staff coming to us with more information, but I guess I agree with Katie, $500,000 doesn't seem to be a lot of money to have a name on a downtown building forever.
President Warren, your thoughts?
You know, I guess I understand the concerns. The concern going forward is the committee's ability to raise money or not. I mean, you know, whether we like it or not, and I don't really like it either, that the only reason people give is so they can have their name on a school. But I think that's what you're hearing is the reality of, you know, the current status or the current reality of how people make money, raise money, I should say. And so it's if we put too many limitations on it, it's, I think, going to be difficult to raise the money. But I also understand everyone's concerns. Because it is, I mean, we're looking at I'm going to put Mike on the spot, total reconstruction of that school. Is the window replacement on here, was that in your, no? Okay, so that is extra too, okay.
But in terms of naming the school for someone who gives big money, are you comfortable with that, or you have concerns with it, as the others have so far?
Well, I mean, I like the fact that I wouldn't, well, go Go ahead.
Do you get a sense, or could you bounce off the committee if there was a way to publicly acknowledge the fact that people gave varying amounts of money, and even, you know, bigger print for bigger money and stuff like that, and something permanently attached outside the office or somewhere in the facility, so people could be acknowledged?
Plaque on the front of
Like they do at the Widener Center.
Right, like the Widener Center, a lot of.
Right. They've already discussed a donor wall.
Right.
We'd like it to be something that's artful so that it looks not just a wall with, you know, it's an elementary K-8
Right,
school.
right.
So something creative. I know another school district near us did a fundraiser where it was a tree and the leaves were gold or metal and each leaf was engraved with the person's name. So they did
Right.
discuss that, definitely.
Okay.
They were just hoping to get something a little bit bigger than, you know, a $50,000 donation at a time. Looking at a rather large one to start
But I
off,
think-
we're hoping.
Okay.
Well, and we also need to know the decision relatively soon, because if we're
Right.
not
Do we know?
going to do that, we need to then follow the policy to get the school named, which means we need to bring a committee together and do some of the pieces that, so we need to get going on that as well. So I think we can
As long
move
as we know.
forward, as long as we know.
Okay.
And we just don't expect as much
How long
money.
was Aldo before it was Aldo? Does anyone understand that question?
No.
How long did the alternative school, alternative school exist?
At Whitney first.
Yeah,
right?
Whitney, that's
But-
right.
But before, now I know where it existed, but how long did that program exist before it was named Aldo Leopold?
The program, my
Because
understanding.
it started at Whitney, then it went to Howe, then it went to
Right.
Alloway, then it went to, those are,
But
it's
it wasn't
geographic
still called the
locations.
Whitney Alternative School?
No, 'cause
When
it was
it
called, it was called Howell
The
There's
alternative?
the Howe Alternative Program, then it became the Alloway Alternative Program.
Oh,
So
really?
when did it actually become Aldo Leopold?
I thought it was Aldo Leopold. Oh, really?
When it went into the academy building.
Not until then.
I thought it was actually in Alloway.
Well, it was before it went to.
No, I thought it was named
And
Aldo
I'm
Leopold
wondering-
in Alloway.
I'm just wondering how critical it is to get this named this quickly.
It's a good question. Mr. Becker?
So, I'm just, you know, there's a couple things here. First of all, I think naming rights after a person potentially paints the picture of one individual out for, you know, individual glory, and many times it's not like that. This could be named after a family. It could be named after someone who was instrumental in the community and is no longer here. And I think if that is someone's goal, right? If you want someone or a family or someone to be remembered for something significant, it's got to be the school, because the school's name is going to be on the news. But I think the school should be a significantly higher price tag. I was thinking about. I realized that my great grandfather in that whole family tree is a huge chunk of my Operation Snowball leaders, and I would actually, probably not, but if I can scrape together the 500 to name it, the 500,000 to name it the Samuel and Martha Alt School, I might throw myself in the ring. I don't have it right now, but I might. But that would be to get there. That would be to recognize continually that, and I'm not gonna. I don't think I'd do that kind of money for a donor wall. But I think the way you presented him, there's safeguards. The board can accept or reject any name. I get if donors are saying they prefer this way, then I don't want to probably deviate from what donors prefer, but I don't see why we wouldn't offer it, although Katie has a point that it might be a little on the low side. Anything over 500 takes me out of the running though, but if we can get 750 or $1 million, maybe that's I'd encourage the committee to talk about that.
Yeah.
And is there student representation on the committee? Should there probably be?
Well, this is the committee that I'm working with is the fund committee.
Okay.
They're the capital fund drive committee. So that's the committee I think you're referring to.
yeah.
We don't have a naming committee yet because that's kind of why we're here.
The policy does though in the naming piece, like
Right.
Carrie's piece that'll come next. The policy, there's certain criteria and then it involves students.
Let me read
Even
it.
if we're doing this beach tour though?
If we're doing this, it would not, because it would be based on the donor. But if we don't, then we'll go back out. But the
But
kids
there
are
should
involved
still
in
be-
the
But there should
decision.
still be, there should still be some kind of a committee evaluating the donor proposal, and I think any naming committee should have a student representative on it.
Yeah, and we're working on the student representative pieces and what areas they
But if we're looking at, so let's say the 50%, and it's 50% of that, but shouldn't it be 50% of what we're spending on that
The whole
building?
thing.
Yeah, that's
You know,
right.
including, what is it, Mike, 3 million or something?
Yeah,
Or is it
3.
3.5 million, so that's 4.5 million. That's what we're spending on this building, and I think the naming right should be based on a percentage of that, not a percentage
Yeah.
on what extra things we're doing.
That's
in the
exactly
building.
right. And let me just interject, the playground equipment at $100,000, which is something that, traditionally we have had. Now, parents go out and raise money, for that, but parents usually take care of that, so I just wanted to throw that out there.
But that's what's on your
Parents
fundraising.
It's the parent is the capital fund drive committee, our parents.
Yeah.
Some of them are donating and doing.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, I appreciate that they're on there, but in many ways, in my mind, that's a separate, anyway.
I'll start out with a little history lesson, and I'll tell you where I am. History lesson, Preble High School Stadium raised $1.2 million to get it done. 100,000 of that went to the auditorium. Now, in going through that, well, if you walk in the stadium, you see a big plaque, and there are certain levels of what people gave, so that's acknowledged there. There was naming rights on the booth and whatnot, but the stadium per se, what happened is that the Gauthier family, who are Preble folks, and several of the kids went through Preble, several members of the family had given a decent amount of money, and the committee said, it really, as a way of appreciation, we feel it's appropriate that we name the stadium, Preble High School, Gauthier Family Stadium. So that's how it came about. They didn't go looking for it for what it's worth. The fact is, they're somewhat reluctant, and they had to be talked into agreeing to that. Of course, then they ended up doing some other things for us. I think what you have to be careful in naming rights is it's an interesting community here, and someone might give the money for the naming rights, but then other people seeing that may not want to have anything underneath that. It's very tricky. I personally do not have a problem with raising money for different things within the building or outside the building. I feel we should go back to what historically we've done in our community, name our elementary buildings after someone, a historical figure from the area. I can't help but believe there must be a GT person that came from this area that we couldn't acknowledge in such a way. I think it, in my mind, keeps it a little cleaner from having either a corporate logo out there or somebody's name in perpetuity. So that's sort of where I am. I'm not comfortable with naming the building. I'm certainly comfortable raising money for aspects of the building.
To make things a little more complicated, just so you understand, there are 2 policies that exist on naming. One is elementary, one is secondary. There is not a K-8 policy. Now, Red Smith, obviously, we can try to model it after, but we don't have a policy to follow either to name it K-8. So we've got a little conundrum there as well. We've got a one or the other, but nothing that covers. So we'll have to explore what our options are and which route we take.
Well, Red Smith followed the elementary model. Red Smith was from the area. I don't know who you know Red Smith is, a sports writer.
It's not local, because we have elementary schools named after national people.
Yeah,
It's not just
elementary
local.
is local or national.
Right.
Kennedy.
MacArthur.
But it also requires a contest be conducted by fifth grade students,
Yes.
and I don't believe we did that with, or I didn't, but I don't believe that happened with the next one.
Well, I was on that committee for naming, and I think that the students did submit names. I'm not sure if it was a contest, but names did surface from teachers in schools, because I was on the committee.
Right.
That
So we'll do our best to meld them together into
Going back to a point made about Red Smith not being local, he did come from the area, but many of our elementary buildings are named after people who were here, then left the area. It's not that like the Doties and others stayed here in this area with some
I think we're
exception.
thinking about Kennedy and
MacArthur and
All the national people.
But how is a local?
Locally or nationally.
Yeah.
Local person.
How Tonk?
Tom.
Yeah, Tank.
Tonk.
We can make whatever work. We just need direction, and we need
I guess
to
I'm a little
timeline.
concerned that, and I appreciate the fact that we would consider and that we would have the veto right, but then it kind of, it puts us in a position of saying, yeah,
The horse is out of the barn.
we'd like to take your money, but we're not so crazy about naming the school after you, and I just think that could get ugly.
So to clarify then, are you okay with them naming the library or the commons? Just so that the fund group, because they're going to be going out shortly to do some asks.
And traditionally, we
and they
have
need to
done
know.
that. We have some things that are named based on people donating things. We have other things that are named based on honoring people. So I think, you know, I would be fine
I'm good with that.
you know, specific things. It just take it to the level of the naming of a school based on how much money you give us. That makes me a little.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yep.
Mr. Becker?
Okay, I guess maybe this just has to be the little 6-1, but we are, you know, public schools are up against, you know, a lot of outside forces with a lot of outside money that want to break down public education, want to privatize everything, and I think if there's careful procedures in place, I don't think we should thumb our noses at that kind of money. It's a lot of money. It's could be 0.5% of our budget if we say let's take it up to $1 million. I'd be okay with taking it higher after some of this discussion, but again, I think you could see people who have a very substantial donation to make, but they want to do it to remember someone who may be someone who's long gone. I don't like the idea of taking that option off the table. I wish things were different and it was no way, we have enough, we're cool, but the individual parts of the building, I don't think you're gonna get the same pull as someone might for, if you name the building after someone, that school's name is gonna be mentioned in the newspaper in 50 years. The name of the library will probably be mentioned in the newspaper once or twice.
Well, then if their name's going to be mentioned for 50 years, then I think it should cost them $2 million. I mean, I don't know. I don't. Fundraising world is not one that I have great familiarity with, and so I will take the superintendent. I think that's an interesting kind of 50% of a cost is kind of the threshold that you use to name something after somebody. Well, 50% of the cost is 3 point something for
3.5
right.
plus this.
I mean, and not just in the paper 50 years from now, on the children's lips 50 years from now in on their little backpacks or lunch. The whole McGillicuddy should cost you $2 million.
I can look at that.
Renewable every 10 years. Well, the rec center's that way. They have enough sense of these places with naming rights. It's not forever.
Right.
It's X number of years you pay for it.
That's true.
And we're saying we
But
name
I
a
don't
school
like
forever.
that because that's an interesting point though, Chris. But the problem is, to me, school is about tradition. It is about community. It is about permanence. And whatever they do at the rec center, or whatever gate at the Packer Stadium is irrelevant to me as far as permanence goes.
well, again, I'm not interested in naming it that way.
Are there enough board members that would be interested if it was for a huge thing, if it was for $2 million?
I'd be willing to talk about it more than for $500,000.
Yeah, to me, $2 million is approximately 50% of the total cost. I mean, I want to look at the total cost of renovating that building. You know, and a lot of, you know, you look at naming rights like the Packer Gates, those are corporations that do that because people go in, they see that name, and it helps, it's advertising for them. Obviously, I think you would have to look at why someone would want their name on a school. I mean, I think that's an important piece. Why do you want your name on a school? And then I get back to, do you care about this school enough to give the money without your name on the school? That's what I would like to know from a potential donor.
Yes.
I think one of the things as we think about this and talk about this, and we've talked internally a fair amount. I know that when we even started having conversations about the school, there was discussion about naming rights that came from the public sector. It wasn't coming from us, because there is that recognition out there, in many of the privates take money from the community, and oftentimes they're from, it goes back to what Andrew is speaking to, a legacy, a family name that is well known, that is well rooted, and has been a contributing member to the community for forever and rooted well. I would be interested, I don't know if there's any leads, I would be interested in knowing if any names had come forward to date that people have even talked about, and what that looks like. The number has been kind of an elusive figure, because there was an understanding by some, because we were able to move forward and we're going to wait and raise the money before we made a determination where to put the children, that's where I think got muddy. It just got muddy, and it isn't a fault. It just is. Some people assumed this, and some parents, I think, made some assumptions, and it did, because there were people saying certain things in the community that before it had even walked before the board. So I think that's where it kind of moved in different places. And to be fair, nobody has done this before. So we're trying to be really responsive to people who want to partner with us and be part of it. And we've looked at, obviously, there's a lot of places in our community that are named after our community people. And I think I go with Brenda, and that I understand concern, but I also understand if there's opportunity for the district to have, a donor, someone interested in doing that I would think that the board would want to entertain what that would be without it, I don't know. I look at it as opportunity as well, and I question, at least to not even have the conversation. What if somebody comes to Tammy tomorrow and says, I'll give you $1.5 million? I don't know. I don't know if anybody would. I'm just, I don't know. I don't know where the donors have been and the communication that's been had with your parents. That's part of it. I don't know what people in the community have said. That's another part of it. Because I think there are conversations out there, which is a good thing. People are talking about it. But I do think people made some assumptions and said them publicly that kind of put us in this interesting spot too. So we'll see.
Well, we've got at least 3 different opinions on the table right now. One is go ahead with it. Second is if it's $2 million. Third one is no. So, and these folks need some direction apparently soon. So, is this something that you would like to think about until next week or the week after, or?
Think about that.
We could do something like have a naming committee, pull the hard restrictions out of the policy and give the naming committee more flexibility. If the naming committee had reason to come to us with a huge donor, it could be discussed. The board still has the final say. We wouldn't shut the door. We wouldn't necessarily, you know, open it wide open either. And that would just be like Red Smith. We were free to accept or reject a name.
Well, here's where I am. I won't be here in 2 weeks. I would hate to tell these folks not to do anything for 2 weeks. First of all, I don't think that would be fair to them and their fundraising committee. I guess I would tell them to go ahead and talk to people and feel people out on amounts, how strong they feel about their name being attached to either the building or a portion of the building or a wing of the building or a learning lab or whatever. And I, for one, am willing to have the conversation, but I think it's got to be higher than $500,000 for the entire school. I'm still hesitant about naming an entire building.
I would also want to know, and if Melissa, you could get this information, whether or not it would jeopardize our access to other funds.
Such as?
Any federal funding, any bonds, things like that. That's
interesting.
Are we bonding for the sale?
No, we're not bonding. And it's not part
I
of
do know that the IRS regulations, if we do pursue naming rights, the IRS regulations call into question whether we have access to tax exempt bonds. But we're not bonding for this.
Okay. But will that preclude us from ever bonding for anything at this school then?
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of.
We'll have to talk to our bond attorneys.
Yeah.
Okay, if you could just, I just don't want us to shoot ourselves in the foot for other things.
What we could do is revise the document and take out the 500,000 and really just bring it back in 2 weeks and recommend that if applicable, that we are allowed to bring it to propose if there's a significant donor and just take the dollar pieces out. And that would give you the freedom to think about
Determine what is significant and what is not.
If we had someone, I mean, you could just revise the document and shorten it up to the governance request.
No, I like that better because then we're not putting a dollar amount and then rejecting a person. We're just indicating that dollar amount just isn't significant enough. But thank you.
And in the meantime,
Well, but then it still begs the question for the donor, what do you want for crying out loud? Tell me what you want, you know? I mean, donors, at least big money donors, they want to see a lot more than just, like you said, the numbers that are up here and some sort of prospectus and
That could be a
Private conversation.
That's and there are as many philanthropic people who prefer to be anonymous in this community
Yeah, that's
as
true.
those who want their names splashed on buildings. So I might even argue whether it is in your best interest to pursue naming rights, because that is not my sense of a large pool of potential donors.
I would concur with that. So would you like to repeat for us the instructions the board just gave you, so I understand it?
No, or do you have enough direction at this point that you can move forward? Or are there other questions that you need?
I want to hear what direction they have from them, so I know all of us what was said here. Okay.
There's two directions you could tell us to go. One would be to bring the document back, take out the dollar values, and just ask for permission or governance request to consider going outside the policy if applicable. The other would be for us to not bring back anything and just to go out and keep doing our work. And if we come up with a donor who is willing to do, we know now more than $500,000, that we bring that back at another time to the group. So we have two options in my mind: come back again in 2 weeks and ask for the governance request, taking out all the dollars, or two, not come back and just go out and see what we can find, and if something pops up, we come back. Those are the two options that I'm getting.
Everyone comfortable with that? Thank
Do
you.
we need to vote? Do we need to vote to have an exception to the school policy to give you?
You would need to move it forward to the next,
The board
to,
meeting.
to an action item.
2 weeks from now.
And
2 weeks
actually,
from
the
now.
governance request
Could
is
be
vague,
done.
is vague enough.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
This works.
But
I mean, we can
vote
vote
that.
on this.
Right. That's
Because
right.
the dollar amounts aren't relevant.
Yeah, that
the
doesn't need to
governance
change.
request, that doesn't.
That wording
Yeah.
on
And
there
that's what
doesn't
we're
really need to
voting on.
change.
Yeah, the problem is the
Well,
document,
no, I would just-
document goes along with $500,000 though.
Right, I would bring the
The
document back with that.
Document isn't in the
Right.
motion, though.
Yeah.
Right.
No, but
No, but it gives the
there's,
impression.
yes, that's right.
So if you
It's one and the same.
lose
Yeah.
the numbers.
Yep, I'll
and
revise the
bring back
document
that
and just bring back the government
governance
request.
That will be
And we
fine.
can go with that. Are people comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Chris.
Thank you.
Rock and roll.
I think we got it.
Thank you. That was so much fun. Let's rename Holy Martyrs now.
Now, this is easier because dude is dead. Okay? This is easier.
This also falls into a bit of its own category, and so we did follow the general naming procedures that are outlined at the beginning of the board policy, with one small change. We had 3 parents serve on the committee in place of the one student representative, as we did not feel that the 4-year-old kindergarten was conducive to having the student. So we increased the committee by an additional parent that's served by the current site. Also, because it's a new site, there is not longevity of having an older student that had formerly attended there to come back also. So the committee did consider that. And we did have a wonderful committee that came together: Mary McCabe, Celestine Jeffries, 2 teachers, Louise Van Sistine and Emily Drain, and 3 parents: Heather Borley, Kim Callis, and Adam Crable. We have 3 names that we are moving forward for your consideration. In all 3 of the names, you'll notice that there is the word learning and center. Currently, the other sites that are similar are named the Early Learning Center and Head Start Learning Center. The first name that we are moving forward for your consideration is Friedrich Froebel Center of Early Learning. Friedrich Froebel is the founder of kindergarten, and as this is a kindergarten site, the committee felt was very appropriate to move forward as a consideration. It also, Froebel believed that play was an important part of meaningful learning, and the philosophy that he generated was part of the first kindergarten, which was in Watertown, Wisconsin, and the second English-speaking kindergarten in Boston in 1860. We also felt it was appropriate, Mr. Fanger, which is actually spelled F-A-E-N-G-E-R instead of F-I-N-G-E-R, who donated the land. He was the original owner of the site. Emigrated to America in 1844 from Rhineland, Germany, also with that background. The second name for your consideration is the Garden School of Early Learning. And again, kindergarten is the origin equivalent to children's garden, and it also connects back to the foundation of Friedrich Froebel for the origin of kindergarten in the United States. And the last name that we are pleased to move forward from the committee is Dean Opichka Center of Early Learning. Mr. Opichka was a Casco native who was a musician, 3-sport athlete, and member of National Honor Society. He received a teaching degree and worked at ARC, which was a program of adults with disabilities, and also then became a teacher in Milwaukee Public Schools. Lance Corporal Opichka was a man of service deployed to Iraq and was killed by a roadside bomb on April 14th, 2008.
Anything else?
Would the committee like to add any other additional information, Mary?
No, I think we've said it all.
Mr. Becker?
Okay, so I get a little worked up about student representation, and the policy didn't say unless somebody thinks it's a good idea to not have a student on it. We have a student representative here who, by our policy, speaks for all students in the district as a student board rep, who it may or may not have been your thing to do, but we also have a group of 30-some students who officially speak as the voice of the students. It would not have been difficult to involve student representation of some other kind. No, you can't, 4-year-old wouldn't have the background knowledge to do it, I get that. But there were ways that student representation could have been on here, and it wasn't done, and that bothers me a real lot. As far as I'm concerned, I would probably go with whatever one of these. I would find out that students, I have my preference, but I guess for me, I would want to hear some student weigh in on the options, not putting it on the spot for right now because you're just seeing them. But that's where I would be at. This didn't have to be done without a student.
I agree in the sense that, this even kind of goes with the conversation before, but the name of a school really is like the identity, and there's a lot of history and pride that a student takes. I mean, I went to Red Smith for 6 years, and I think the naming of the school, we really have to be weary of the message it sends to the kids, because even before like a donor, what kind of message does that send to the kids? And in this sense, are they going to know who he is? Are they going to know? You just kind of got to be aware and cognizant of the message that it sends to the kids.
And part of the reason why, it was a really good conversation, and I think a lot of the parents felt very strongly about the identity of the school being a place where students play, and it is a classic kindergarten in that sense. But there was a very strong feeling from one of the parents who was there about honoring a veteran. So even though Dino Pitchka did not attend that particular school because it didn't exist, and he also happens to be a veteran and also a teacher. I think it's interesting that, to have a student there, even though the student would not have been involved in the school. I don't know. I understand what you're saying, Andrew, but the problem is if the student doesn't have a connection to the school, then the student is sort of thinking back to his or her own kindergarten, which isn't that particular school, or pre-K, which isn't that particular school. I don't know.
That's not remotely my point, though.
Okay.
Freya, did you know who Red Smith was before you went to Red Smith School?
No.
So you learned about Red Smith
Absolutely.
at the school?
Well, to that particular point, I've always been bothered in our schools that are named after people that we don't have anything inside the school. I can't think of one that does, with the name of the person the school is named after and a little bio under it. To me, it's a very short and dirty history lesson, which we've never picked up on for whatever reason, but I guess that's neither here nor there. I understand Andrew's point too. The policy says something should have gotten a waiver about it ahead of time before you march with it. That I understand. We are sitting here right now, though, with these recommendations.
Yep.
I will just to lighten the conversation a little bit. If you would have had my grandson on there, there was a fourth recommendation, Choo Choo Bob.
There you go.
Any other thoughts about these three names, or?
I like their first recommendation. I think it makes a lot of sense. Wisconsin was obviously a pioneer in kindergarten, and this gentleman was basically responsible for starting kindergarten. I think their first recommendation is an outstanding one, and I would support that.
Does ICSC meet before the time we'll vote, or no?
No,
Yeah.
we do have a quarterly.
Yes.
Oh, there is?
Yes. On the
Next
12th.
Wednesday? Is that it?
No, there's mascot names too.
Yes, there are. The frogs or the fireflies. So it's very alliterative, which I kind of like.
Wait, the Friedrich Frabel
Frogs or fireflies.
Or fireflies.
Is it fireflies?
Well, that was one of the two.
I think, Andrew, the intent of the language is to say that if you're going to file a complaint against the district because you're retaliated against, you would have to follow proper procedures to give the district an opportunity to do a due diligence and investigation before you can allege that we didn't try to prevent the retaliation. How would we have known whether or not this was occurring to prevent retaliation if the process wasn't followed?
Well, it could be construed that someone makes a complaint straight to a board member. That wasn't the official policy. Whatever person finds out about the complaint and retaliates, should still be a serious offense, right? Even though the person technically did not go to the chief human resources officer.
Well, I would, in that scenario, I would assume that at that point, if we're made aware that there was a complaint that was brought forward to a board member, then following that there was retaliation, we have another issue that we have to investigate on top of what the original allegation was as well. Until we know that the alleged harassment is occurring, we can't do the investigation. So I don't think it prevents somebody from mentioning it to somebody else, but we certainly would want, hopefully, to encourage the board member, if you hear that information, to make sure you let us know that this is what was brought forward.
And I would. It's just that, I don't know, Melissa, am I wrong here that this could be construed as you're forfeiting your whistleblower protection if you go out of the normal?
I didn't read it that way.
Okay.
But
I defer to you on that.
if we can make it clearer, we can definitely try and make it clearer.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's the how we clarify chain of command, because there's generally multiple people you can take concerns to. You can take it to your supervisor, you can call HR directly. So oftentimes you have
The term may imply step by step by step, where you have an open door policy in HR, so.
Yeah, that might need to be clear.
Any other questions, concerns? Thank you. Anything else?
There is one thing I do want to point out, though, that, and it's the page 60 emergency. No, it's page 65. And just to be clear, this one does change a requirement for the paraprofessionals to come when we have a school delay. They've been coming in with the teachers, and this policy change would require that they come in with the other hourly employees, which is at the beginning of their regular shift. Obviously, if they or any employee has a problem getting out of their driveway or their road, can't get to work, there are processes in each building who to call, and they would follow that. We're not saying that there should be any concern for their safety, that we would ask them, to come to work when they couldn't, but this would require them to come in with the other employees. So that is a change. But right now they're coming in with the teachers, but they are being compensated for the full day.
Well, the teachers are too, being compensated, aren't they?
The teachers are salaried, and so they tend to, work longer hours, whereas the paras, their shift is done, their schedule is done. So we're treating them like our employees. When we go to a time and attendance system, they'll be corrected because they will clock in or in and out when they actually work, whereas teachers will not.
And you do have it built in an option for them to, without paid personal time or whatnot.
Yes.
Or they could make up the time during the course of that week as well if they work it out with their supervisor. The idea is not to try to deprive somebody of any wages of any kind whatsoever. It's to make them consistent so all the hourly employees are to report at the time that their regular day starts.
Well, I understand the way you're hurting them. I mean, in my mind, for them to show up without the teachers or students there, I'm not sure for what. I mean, maybe some of them have some, I mean, in a positive sense, busy work to get done, perhaps, but just so I'm clear with it again, to repeat what you said, even though they're not coming in, they can make that time up so they're not going to lose salary unless they choose to.
Yeah, if they can't, if their regular start time is 7:30 and they can't get in because of whatever issue is coming up with transportation or whatever's happening, and they come in an hour later, they can work that out so they can either come in earlier or stay later during the course of the week to make that time up.
If they're not able to come in at all, will they have the opportunity to make up that entire shift that they lost?
Well, the expectation would be that if they can't, on the old language, they would have been expected to report 30 minutes prior to the students showing up. If they weren't able to get in at all, they would have to use some kind of a benefit to take off, either personal leave or a non-paid day for the parapro. So this doesn't alter that. If they have a personal reason they can't get in, they still would have to find a way to make that up.
That would be the same as any days that they couldn't make it into work. If it wasn't a sick day, if they're sick, they take sick time. If they can't come in for other reasons, they could use a personal day. Or they can take it unpaid. They could. But typically, we do require people to use their personal time first before they take unpaid.
Okay.
Not that this will be solved or fixed tonight, but I just want to point out for the record that this is another handbook update that, while the contents of the update seem to be good, we still have a largely undefined workday. We have no restrictions on when meetings can be called, including changing an individual building, changing the workday in such a way that causes serious child care problems for people who contracted child care for the year. And regardless of how much it is or isn't happening, if at all, there were rules, and there is not a very well-defined workday, which I think is still a serious concern, and there really hasn't been one for a long time. There's been an understanding, but an understanding is not a rule, it's not policy. So I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention that in the context of updating the handbook.
Any other comments, concerns? Thank you. Other than announcements, that is all, Madam President.
All right. Are there any other announcements again?
Yes, a question for Ms. Weaver Hendrickson. Any comments on the article in the paper? I certainly have some thoughts about it, but is there any comments about the article that was just in the newspaper?
I think it was a fair assessment of what was discussed, but we were not asked specifically for our data because our data was provided to the board. So had I been asked that, we do have it available in more ways than just what we presented to the board. So if you'd like me to give that information to you in a different format, we do have that available. But I think it was a fair, accurate representation that we are open and honest with and forthcoming with our seclusion and restraint data.
Perhaps you could clarify the point of paper that said there were 4 districts, at least 4 districts, Green Bay being one of them, that hadn't collected the proper data for DPI.
Yes. And we do it properly, and we had it posted, so when there was the question or the open records request from that company, Gannett, Publishing. We were not asked for open records request because we already had the information they were requesting out there for the public to see. So we were forthcoming, one of the 4 that were.
So you're telling me the newspaper article was incorrect? We had turned in the proper data to DPI and replace it.
There was 2 different articles in 2 different papers, so I'm trying to remember.
They had Green Bay featured in one column, which was separate from the big headlines that said people aren't forthcoming with data. We were listed very much at the end, and they said we were the only ones who identified specific by ethnicity data.
Right.
And that was in the one article. And then there was the other article that ran along the side on the column that Green Bay was pretty much featured in.
Right, and the first one where we were featured in the most, they had an interview with me, and the other one, it was a phone interview for a few seconds. We provided to you all the data that DPI has asked us to provide, so I would say that it's not an accurate representation.
I might ask that you go back and just double check the article and then make a comment afterwards. I will make a comment about
because they said that we didn't provide it by school.
Yes,
is what
I
the
think
correct
that's it.
article said.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting that that's a headline, you know, about restraint and seclusion. There are some youngsters out there that need to be restrained periodically. I mean, and you see there's really a small number, but those are very outside of a fight between a couple kids. That is a small number. Before they hurt themselves or somebody else, somebody has to restrain them, and fortunately they're trained to do that. At one time, those kids would not have been with us. They would have been in an institution or someplace else. We serve those kids as a public entity, okay? Parochial and private schools don't have that problem because, quite frankly, they show them the door when they have any problems with kids. So I think the slant that I see with it, that I'm very proud that we're willing to work with those kids that are troubled.
Well, and the Seclusion Restraint Law Act 125 only applies to public schools. It does not apply to private schools.
You wouldn't know.
So we wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know.
I think
What a surprise.
the other piece is they did have a graph in there and showed the proportions and percentages of student population that were using seclusion and restraint. And I would encourage everyone, if they've read the article and haven't looked at that bar graph, you can see what a low number percentage-wise Green Bay is.
That's
as
right.
compared to many, many, many other districts in this area. It is significantly low. I think staff and Claudia continues her efforts and work to ensure that people are properly trained so that they know. I mean, I agree with Dr. Wagner as a building principal. There were a few times where the injury of the child was at risk, and you cannot allow, I used to say, not on my watch will I lose a child. I will do what I need to do, and I was trained.
And we've analyzed our data, and we've had great, numerous conversations at the cabinet level prior to any of this coming out about what that data looks like and how and what we need to do as a district to move forward.
And make sure that it isn't disproportionate.
Correct.
I mean, we're looking at everything and getting training, so.
Correct.
Moving in the right direction.
All right, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right.
What's your tomorrow?
For more information or to obtain copies of this program, contact CESA 7 Interactive Learning Services at 920-465-5218.